According to reports, Iran is disbanding its controversial morality police. This comes after 2 months of intense protests in the country, sparked by the death and detention of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini after her arrest by morality police for allegedly having incorrectly worn her hijab. The morality police are part of the country's attempt to keep the public in line with the Islamic values of the theocratic regime in Iran. These police have the power to stop women for improperly wearing the hijab and take them into custody for questioning. Thousands have been arrested during these intense 2 months of demonstrations, and some have faced the death penalty as the regime attempts to squash the protests that continue to sweep the country in the wake of Amini's death. Is the abolition of the morality police the first step to recognizing the success of the women's movement in Iran? Will there be an end to the headscarf mandate? And what does this mean for Iran?
So let's get to it. What is next for Iran's nationwide protest? As always, we begin with this quick fire round of 30 seconds each to lay out your initial stance on the matter, and we'll pick up the conversation right after. So, Dr. Kazemi, please take the lead.
Yeah, 100% no. I would say this is not a concession, and this is not what people want. People from the beginning have been chanting slogans that the dictator and the Islamic Republic should go. And from the beginning, they've said the target is the entirety of the clerical fascist system of Islamic Republic. This has nothing to do with just abolishing the morality police. It's just this. It's just misleading, and it's just propaganda from the state, just spreading rumors that is not even true.
Okay, Dr. Goldberg, your take?
I tend to agree, but I think perhaps we should not rush completely into assuming that the abolition of the Islamic Republic is the only target. I think that the Islamic Republic flinched. And I think that because it flinched, we might be looking at another future, another scenario for this revolution that does not have to end in overall violence or in a flight from Iran like the Shah did in 1979.
Last but not least, Martin Himel, your take?
I agree that Iran did flinch, and it's very important that it flinched. Excuse me. It's very important that it flinched because that means that the protesters will be more emboldened. The protesters will take more action. They'll see results with no. But let's be sure here: the police has not been disbanded. They're not on the streets. They're not out there, but they have not been disbanded.
Okay, and maybe someone can get a glass of water for Mr. Martin Himel. I hope the control room, can take care of that. So let's begin our conversation, and please feel free to interact from this point onwards, of course. So is it a first step on behalf of the regime in recognizing the success of the protest, or is it the first and essentially the last such a step, Dr. Kazemi?
I think for the past 44 years, we have had enough time to think. And I say that as an Iranian myself who has lived under the Islamic Republic for 20 years. I'm not rushing. I've been living under this state for so long, and for 44 years is not a little time. It's a very long time for the people of Iran who have been resisting against this state. And we have tried every possible scenario under the sun, reforms, different kinds of reforms, different factions of the state. Nothing has worked. And therefore, this the fact that what we want is not a prediction of the future, but we know exactly what we want. If people want to predict, they might be rushing into different predictions, and we are not psychics. Therefore, talking about what people want is one thing, predicting the future is another. And the state has been scrambling for the past 77 days, trying to crack down on the protesters, trying to come up with different propaganda techniques to say, oh, this is separatists, or this is Israel, or this is U.S., this is CIA, this is Western what is it called? Intervention. This is people who want to become naked. They've tried, but the truth is, yes, they have flinched and they're scared, and that's how authoritarianism works. A state is always scared because they know that they have no legitimacy.
But maybe it's just an attempt on behalf of the regime to restore faith, not by force, but by, again, to restore public trust to an extent, Dr. Goldberg.
It is, I think, an attempt by the regime, but I agree with Dr. Kazemi that it is too little and too late. That is not to say necessarily that the regime is about to collapse. I think that the situation on the ground is a little more complex. I think the Islamic Republic was hated, but I think the Islamic Republic was also accepted by quite a few Iranians as a necessary evil. And as proof of that, we have the fact that the Islamic Republic had yet to see, up until this wave of resistance, an opposition that looks like victorious oppositions have looked in Iran over the last 100 years. So I think we're not necessarily going to see the demise of the Islamic Republic. I agree that certainly public will appears to be focused on that, but there's still some time before this movement has the symbolic capital, let's call it, to place itself as an immediate alternative to the Islamic Republic once it goes away.
But I think, please, Martin.
Yes, I think that what's really important here, there was this solid foundation. There still is a solid foundation of the Iranian government and its position in Iranian society. But an important block has been removed. Is it going to knock down the whole foundation? Probably not. But it's going to shake it. And I think it's more of a case of maybe what we saw in Britain in the 13th century with the Magna Carta, that the voice, that's what the start was for the end of the monarchy. It took 500-600 years. But I'm not saying it's going to take 500-600 years in Iran, but it might be the start of the dilution of their absolute power. Because if they're going to solve this problem, they're going to have to give some leeway. And if women are going to walk the streets of Tehran without hijabs, that is going to be an important shaking of the infrastructure of the Islamic Republic.
But can the regime modernize itself while still keeping loyal to its core values? Is there an in-between here?
The regime has never been monolithic.
No, 100%.
Even though the Islamic Republic has appeared and has been presented as a single monolith, the regime has never been monolithic. What we're seeing now is the struggles in power of those who are currently wielding power. And they call themselves revolutionaries now. They used to be called hardliners. The reformists, as Dr. Kazemi mentioned, are no longer a credible option. But the Islamic Republic has always had a strain of pragmatism, an ability to withstand very interesting and complex difficulties within Iran and outside Iran. This isn't a regime that leans exclusively on brute force. And what we're seeing now could also include the unraveling of the unity within the regime. And once again, we're going to see two separate factions. And that's a thing that we've actually been used to seeing in the Islamic Republic ever since it was founded.
Dr. Kazemi, you're saying no way. You can't have eat the cake and have it too.
No, 100%. 100% not. I'll tell you one thing. There are three pillars of the Islamic Republic. One is controlling women's bodies and sexuality through hijab and safeguarding the boundaries of genders. The other one is hate for America, and the other one is hate for Israel. So any of these three, if that falls, Islamic Republic will not exist the way it is. So we just need to do a fact checking before, because of this media reports that even the morality police has been abolished. That's not what happened. So what happened is, in a press conference, someone asked that this top prosecutor, Sayyid Jafar Montazeri, why was the guidance patrol not around anymore? And Montazeri said the patrol wasn't the business of the judiciary, but of the, of the police. So, and I quote, they launched it and they shot it themselves. And then he hastily added that the judiciary would still monitor behavior of the society. So the guidance patrol, or what was called the Committee of the Islamic Republic at the beginning of the revolution, I mean, it's not dismantled. And even if it is dismantled at some point, it's still the law. Hijab is a law. Even if the guidance patrol doesn't go around to like enforce it in the shopping malls or in the parks, it is still the law, and it exists. And the segregation in society exists. The buses, the schools, the mosques, everything is gender segregated. It's a gender apartheid system, and it cannot be dismantled by just one thing.
But Dr. Kazemi, if you say that one of the three pillars of the Islamic Republic was hatred for America, it was the Islamic Republic who signed a nuclear agreement with America and who accepted potential diplomatic relations with America. It's the Islamic Republic that is still trying to reanimate the agreement in negotiations with the United States. I'm not objecting at all to what you're saying about a gender apartheid.
Yeah.
No.
They signed the agreement. They signed the agreement because they needed money. That's the only reason. It's not because of love for America or accepting America or the world order.
They signed the agreement because they thought it was a politically viable decision for them. There's another thing that I'd like to mention about Iranian history.
But they still said death to America, and they
still say death to America. You're absolutely correct. But all Iranian dictators know that they can ignore the public at their own peril. The Iranian dictators, as repressive as they might be, and the Shah was as repressive, know full well that they cannot ignore the public because Iran, in unprecedented fashion, has a history of successful popular rebellion. I think the Islamic Republic knows this well, and I think that there is a division within the Islamic Republic, a division that was apparent about a year and a half ago, and they were arguing about what sort of confidence-building measures the Islamic Republic should take with regard to its citizenship. Now, I'm not arguing at all with what you're saying. It's a vile dictatorship. It's gender apartheid. Everything is there, but the Islamic Republic is quite capable of pragmatism. It has a strain of pragmatism that's been there since it was founded.
I agree with you, but not. Yes, I agree with you that it's very pragmatic in that sense, but it doesn't think about national interest. It only thinks about its own viability and the militia groups that it has all over the region. They are the groups that are supported by this state rather than the people of Iran. So they think about their survivorship.
I think that what could happen with all this, when you talk about pragmatism, is that maybe the leadership in Iran will think it's probably a good time to reduce the sanctions significantly, because that way they could placate the people. To reduce the sanctions significantly, it might be more eager than it has been in a long time to reach a deal with the United States and other countries, because if it can ease the economic hardship, maybe that will ease also some of the motivation for demonstrations. That might be something they might be thinking in Iran. Another issue that we should look at is how are the neighbors looking at what's going in Iran? How is Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Israel, and are looking at what's going on in Iran? And I bet they are going to test the waters to see how much resolve the Iranian government has now when its foundations are being shaken. Saudi Arabia and the Emirates went into an agreement with Israel, basically because it wanted to have some sort of force that would...
We will get to the international ramifications of the domestic situation of the Islamic Republic right after the break, a short break, and we're back with part 2 of the summit. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the summit. Still with us, Dr. Sona Kazemi, Dr. Ori Goldberg, and Martin Himel. Thank you very much for staying with us. Before we dive back into the conversation, let's take a quick listen to the latest remarks of Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi.
Iran's Republican and Islamic foundations are constitutionally entrenched, but there are methods of implementing the constitution that can be flexible.
And let's kickstart with another quick fire round of 30 seconds each. We're seeing it in China. We're seeing it now perhaps in Iran too. Is this barrier of fear from the establishment being vanished? Martin Himel, please take the lead.
I don't think the barrier of fear has completely been vanishing. I think it's quite there. People are scared to get arrested. They're scared to get shot. They're scared to face long jail sentences. But I feel that the protesters are now more emboldened, especially after they've seen the Iranian regime blink when it comes to the morality of police. And so I think that we're going to see more intensified demonstrations. I don't think it's going to be lessened. I think it's going to be more intense. intensified, and that's going to have international repercussions as well.
Dr. Kazemi, your thoughts?
I think, again, about the morality police abolishment, I think that's like spreading misinformation and disinformation. I don't think it's happening. And even I just checked Etemad online, one of the state news agencies that completely denied the rumors that the morality police is going to be abolished. So we just need to be very careful about spreading those things that sometimes just pop up in the media. I think people are not afraid. They are on the streets. They are getting killed. They are getting raped in the prisons. They are there. And there is strikes going on across Bazaar and a bunch of other businesses. And this is a full-fledged war.
Just to stress, if it wasn't clear enough, we're not suggesting it is indeed happening, but the mere discussion over the morality police is something we believe is important enough to be discussed here on the show. Dr. Goldberg, your thoughts?
I don't think this has anything to do with the universal barrier of fear. I think what we're seeing in Iran is a remarkably Iranian event. I think what we're seeing in China is also very much Chinese. I don't for a second believe that it's completely impossible for the Chinese authorities to placate the Chinese who are now protesting. I don't think we should see this as a universal phenomenon, except, of course, for the fact that dictatorships have validation, have a date where their validation expires.
Right, and now please feel free to interact from this point onwards. And Dr. Kazemi, excuse me for being perhaps a bit blunt with or provocative with this next question. Iran is accusing the West of meddling. Do they have a point? Are they that far-fetched?
I think that is indeed funny. What the West has done for the past 44 years is to be in bed with the Islamic Republic and flirt with it. As you know, the other Dr. Goldberg mentioned, I mean, signing deals and killing themselves to bring the mullahs to the table. So this is I can tell you that Islamic Republic has one opposition in the entire world, and that's the Iranian people. Everyone else in the world has been tolerating this regime until now. So the only war that actually exists is between the Iranian people and the regime. So these scenarios that it's the West meddling, it's just, it's a joke. And it's funny because, like I said, the West and also Russia and China have done nothing for the past 44 years but to actually tolerate this regime. This regime is a member of the UN, has a place on the status of women, which has been, a matter of jokes recently, and people have been trying to push the Islamic Republic out of that council, saying that, a regime that, treats women as second-class citizens doesn't have a place in this. So, no, I would say this is people resisting authoritarianism. This is people with their flesh and blood standing in front of a regime that knows nothing but execution and amputation and rape.
And speaking to that point of the West, Martin Himel, Tehran reaching 60% uranium enrichment, the nuclear threat becoming more imminent. What's the impact on the attempts to restore the nuclear deal, the domestic situation that is, on the status of negotiations?
Well, I think the Iranians are trying to call the West's bluff, if it is a bluff, because President Biden and Israel said Iran will not go nuclear. Well, you have an Iran nuclear once it reaches an enrichment level that it can create a bomb. It doesn't necessarily have to put the bomb together, but if it's got the fissile material, the essential fissile material, it can make a bomb anytime it wants. And it is either there or about to be there. So either the West is going to intervene in a very overt way, or the West is going to sit back and make an agreement that won't have any relevance because Iran will already be a nuclear power. What I did want to say before, though, is that I think the West may not be involved actively in the revolt. I'm sure it's involved passively with social media and social media intervention, like many countries are. Yeah. But it is watching very closely what's going on, because Iranian resolve will be affected by whatever happens on the streets of Iran. And I'm sure in Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, who have allied themselves with Israel to try to contain Iran, are going to watch it very closely. So will Washington, and definitely here in Jerusalem.
Dr. Goldberg, where or rather when is the line between a full-on revolution and protest? Is there any other way of this to end other than a complete regime reshuffle? And what's the alternative?
That's a really good question. Iranian revolutions usually operate at their own pace, march to their own drum, if you will. I don't think we have a real idea of how long this is going to take. It doesn't seem like the protesters are eager to make this a full-fledged coup. I actually don't think they're looking for a coup. I think that they're still building momentum. I'll be a little more shy, let's call it that, than Dr. Kazemi, and say that I think there are still sectors of Iranians who are not out in the streets. We're not the only opposition to the Islamic Republic. I think the Islamic Republic still enjoys some support, even if it is only because it is the dictatorship in power. I think the protesters are still working on making their coalition cohere. It's very clear to the young people who are leading it. I think it might be less clear to other people. And every day where the Islamic Republic falters, every time it flinches, helps the protesters. In that sense, time is on the protesters' side, which means that nobody has to be in any sort of active rush. I don't know whether this will end in the flight of the clerical leadership. I don't know if it will end in their stepping down. I have a hard time seeing it. I think what we'll see first is infighting inside the regime. I think we might see within a week to a month, we'll see senior regime figures siding, maybe not bluntly, but effectively with the protesters. I think that'll be a good sign that things are turning and that the momentum is fully with the protesters, and that the hardliner leadership of the Islamic Republic should be taking flight.
Dr. Kazemi, in the short time we have left, what is the end game for protesters here?
Well, it's really hard to predict. Like Dr. Goldberg said, it's a process, and every revolution, every social movement, any longing for change has its own process that it has to take. But there's one thing that we know is that a secular democratic Iran, and that's what the protesters want, a secular democratic Iran is not only an asset for its people, but it's also good for its neighbors, and it's also good for the world. So what we have here is just a state that is enemy of everyone, basically. Is an enemy of the environment, enemy of clean water, enemy of women, enemy of democracy, enemy of the world. So this regime, when it's dismantled, when it's overthrown, when it's gone to history where it belongs, then we are going to have freedom, woman life freedom, like protesters are chanting. Which is good for everybody. So I don't know why it should be in anybody's interest to keep this regime in place, and I think it's going to change.